Evening and happy Trinity Sunday to all of you who are listening today. I did not have a mass that I was celebrating for the people, but I did go and sing with the school at the Latin Mass at noon because I heard they were going to be a little shorthanded. To be a human being means to have some goal, some purpose, or some aim in life. It is what we do. It is how we are fundamentally constituted. We don't act aimlessly. We don't act without thought, but we have goals towards which we strive. Now, when we strive for the highest goal, we could call that striving after God. We could call that submitting to God, uh, going along with His plan, with His creation. Everything lines up well. But it is possible for us to be distracted by other things. It is possible for us to rebel against the path that God has laid out for us and strive after things which are not from Him, which are not compatible with Him, to place something else in that top place towards which we strive, uh, where God is supposed to be. So people can do this with money. They can decide that what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and make the number go up, get as big a number as I can manage, to have as much wealth as I can possibly manage. And sometimes you could observe this in people when they um, are just spending a lot of time working. And very often they end up piling up all this money and never actually spending or enjoying it. They fall into the trap of the miser there, and they allow all sorts of things which they should be attending to fall to the wayside. So that's one way that people can rebel against God, is by pursuing wealth inordinately beyond what they should be. Another way that they can rebel against God is by seeking after, we could call it honors, or we could call it, probably in the more modern language, we call it status. That I want to reach a certain level in this place in the world, this job, in politics, in media, all of these different places. I want to get as high up as I can possibly go. They make that their aim. They make that their goal. It might not necessarily be about the money, although very often climbing up in status does give you money. Some hierarchies you could climb don't pay very well at all. So that's what some people might want. They might want status in the eyes of other people rather than what God really has for them. So wealth and status, first two. The third one, and these are not all necessarily mutually exclusive, is power. They might want to be able to control things, to manipulate things, to influence things in a certain way. So I'm quite convinced that there's a number of very powerful people in the world who don't have necessarily much status, that they prefer to stay in the back rooms and exercise their power away from the public eye. Perhaps being unknown is even more advantageous to their control of everything that they can encounter. Wealth, status, power, pleasure. That's maybe the default setting for most human beings, and perhaps the least irrational of them. It's at least something that you actually enjoy. And very often, when we think of a hedonist, we think of somebody who's pursuing pleasure. Um, we think of somebody who's doing it very poorly, who's doing so in a self-destructive way, that they are falling to pieces, and their life is going to fall to pieces. They're going to drink themselves to death by the age of 30, something like that. But I think a subtle and insidious form of hedonism is what I call lake country hedonism. That we're always looking forward to the next vacation. We're always looking forward to the next fun experience that I get to have. That sort of more subtle and sustainable pleasure might be even more capable of entrapping you on account of the fact that it could be sustained over a lifetime. That kind of subtle hedonism certainly could. So we've got wealth, status, power, and pleasure. We could look at those four things and say, and if you're educated in philosophy, if you've read a little bit of Aristotle, a little bit of Thomas Aquinas, you'll know that that's a list that comes from him of goods of life, a type lifestyle that you can pursue in exclusion to man's highest good, which is following after God. And there's another one which I ultimately think is reducible to one of the other four, but manifests itself differently. And so we could treat that separately. That would be destruction. People who, for whatever reason, have nothing better to do than to try and destroy something. We could see this in some of the darkest episodes of human history where those other goods don't really seem to be directly pursued by some kind of homicidal maniac, um, somebody who's committing a mass shooting or something rather dark and unpleasant like that. That destruction we could think of as a fifth thing that people can pursue, even though I would be personally convinced that it's actually a part of either power or pleasure or status to do so. Just to engage in that wanton destruction is probably motivated by one of those other three goods. But since it manifests itself so differently, it's worth treating it differently. So that's we can think of five ways that you can rebel against God: wealth, status, power, pleasure, or simple destruction. There's not a lot of options there. It feels like you're playing some kind of a video game and you've got those five classes that you could choose from, and that's it. Now, the amazing thing about following after God, of achieving your highest end, setting your aim straight, is that goodness and evil are not equal. They are not on equal footing. So we talk about following after God. We talk about making him the aim of your life. Well, that can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. Um, just as many uh, different avenues towards goodness you have, that can be also an added avenue towards holiness. Some people pursue great learning and dive deep into wisdom. That's how they glorify God. Great. You could do that by following after wisdom. Some people create beautiful art to give glory to God. They're very passionate about that. That gives glory to God too. Some people organize things. They're leaders, they're administrators. They make good things happen, oftentimes very much beyond the scenes. Excellent work that you can do. Some people are going out to help people who are in some kind of distress. There's many different types of distress, so there's many different ways of doing that. Perhaps you're simply feeding people who are hungry, going to desperate parts of the world, making sure people aren't starving to death. That's a good thing that you can do. Or maybe you're more subtly counseling people who are in some kind of spiritual distress. Maybe you're doing this in more of a pastoral care kind of way. Also, very good. There's a great many people who simply go to work, take care of their families, take care of all sorts of good things underneath God's supervision. All of that is wonderful. All of that is good. All of that is pleasing to God. And so what you find is that um, people who are good, people who are following after God, people who are submitting to God have much more variety about them than people who are rebelling against God. People who rebel against God in one of those five ways, wealth, status, power, pleasure, or destruction, all become very monotonous. They're all doing basically the same kind of thing. But with the Lord, following after him, there's a great deal of variety. There's many different good people as you can find. You will find people like that following after God. So there's only five forms of rebellion, but There are very, very many ways to be good. And that ultimately is very good news. So that's all I've got. Uh, Go ahead and hop on and tell me how I'm wrong. Yeah, next week I will be live from Washington, D.C. Hey, yeah, Casey. Bishop Barron and I have the same teacher. All right, all right. He's There are only a few ways to be correct about these things. So next week I should be able to do this live from Washington D.C. Where I'm off studying canon law. Um, the only thing I'm worried about is the quality of the Wi-Fi at the rectory in Washington D.C. Um, Mark came and visited last year, and he uh, he wasn't impressed with the Wi-Fi. So hopefully, hopefully the Wi-Fi is better. You're looking a little blocky yourself right now.
Blocky?
Yeah, there's just some compression.
Really? That's on your end. That ain't my end.
Well, yeah, obviously.
The heck? Yeah, what did they fix the Wi-Fi over there in DC, or do I have to drive out and fix it for you?
Well, that would be awfully good of you to do so. I'm not terribly confident. I don't know. I'm really hoping that they'll have Ethernet ports in every room, and I'll just plug into the wall, and that'll fix it. Because
You're there next week?
next week, yep,
Oh, well, I'm gonna drive right past you on my way home then. Okay.
yep, flying out on Wednesday. Get to go out to the swamp.
Yeah. Good luck. Yeah, I would stop in on my drive down, but there ain't no way I'm taking any car. And I'm taking my car up north. We're taking the convertible to the Cape. I'm not taking any car anywhere near DC ever again. And just not. I mean, maybe a rental or like an old beat up car or something, but
You steal one.
no interest. No,
Yeah,
that was scary enough. I don't regret it. I'm not saying that, but also not doing it again. It's
yeah.
like the hostel at Thunder Bay. Don't regret it. Not doing it again. It's like same trick. Yeah.
Yep, yep, yep. That's how life goes sometimes. Oh,
Yeah, I didn't realize that, but oh, yeah, yeah, if you get, permission there, I'll go in and fix stuff. That's no problem. Just let me know. Not that
okay.
far away.
I'll keep that in mind. I suppose we'd have to give you room and board and
Probably.
maybe a little remuneration, but
You can meet me at the airport and,
oh,
yeah, renew
we'll take the light rail or the
buy me
metro.
buy me food and, yeah, that's remuneration. That'd be fine.
Okay,
I'll fly out there. I'll fly into DC from Charlotte or whatever. That's
yeah,
not whatever.
be
I
like
don't
a
care.
40-minute flight from Charlotte.
Probably, yeah. Try to use up and down.
That's what Minneapolis or Fargo to Minneapolis is like. Just get
Wait,
up.
you can fly into Columbia, and you can almost all those flights. There are some like you can go from Columbia to Chicago, which I didn't realize. I was like, oh, that would have been handy to know. Um, but usually it's Atlanta, which is a 3-hour drive, or Charlotte, which is a 2-hour drive. So those are both up and
Mhm,
down.
mhm,
So
mhm.
I think yeah, I've never flown into Columbia, South Carolina airport. And it is it's far enough away that it's like, yeah, but the big airport's close and it's way better. So I love
Mhm.
Charlotte Airport actually. I think it's fantastic. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I definitely go and visit you, and if your internet's not working, I can come out and do some internet work.
Yep. Yeah. And what do you think of it? Are there more than 5 forms of rebellion?
I don't know. Those things are hard because I have to actually sit down and like work it all out and look for counter instances and And there's always the, where you're drawing the line, and I mean, I think that most I don't know if you listed this or if this is any different, right? But right now, the only form of rebellion that I see that's super prevalent in the world is uh, rebellion against hierarchy under your own authority. So not in other words, it's non-telodic, right? It's like I don't have a reason to rebel, right? I'm just rebelling by default because me, like because me. And this is something I've been struggling with really for about a week now. Just like noticing how many times this happens. And yeah, I went completely freaking bonkers today because I'm just there's a situation, and I'm like, well, there's only one way this person got this information like this, which is ridiculous information, um, and it comes from somebody who's mentally ill for sure, like admitted, like, oh, the doctor in Boston said this. Oh, okay, well, but that's a mental illness diagnosis, right? And I know at some point someone is gonna say, "What do you mean?" Or "You can't know that." That's always what it is. You can't know that. A number of times that's been true 0, by the way, but just in case we're keeping count, like, no, I just say things when I know them, or I qualify them with, "I don't know about that," you know, but usually when I say something, especially about somebody, right? When I'm speaking about somebody and I say this person X, it's not because I made it up in my head. It's actually because I have information, usually incontrovertible information that makes it true. And this is one that just bothers me, right? 'Cause it happens a lot. People go, "You don't know that person's mentally ill." And I'm like, "I've talked to them a lot, and you've never spoken to them once. How dare you question me? Like, what are you talking about? Why would you think that was an okay thing to do?" So, they're just automatically rejecting anything that sounds to them like authority, no matter how authoritative the person is, right? And or no matter how little they are certain they know about it. Like, you don't know anything about psychology. How would you know? Right? I've read the entire DSM-3. So it's like,
Did you find yourself in there?
oh yeah, of course. If you don't find yourself in the DSM-3, then there's a real problem. You're like a Western Buddhist. Om and the nothing. I had to tell somebody on Twitter today, like, yeah, the idea of nothingness is a theoretical or a hypothetical concept.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he didn't know that. Believe me, I could tell, and I'm kind of like, for a
There's
smart guy, you're kind of
there's
dumb.
no thing there.
Yeah, yeah.
There's
I'm
no
going.
thing.
I'm
It's
going
just
to
a void.
define something that cannot be defined by definite. Wait, what? Really? That's your.
Yeah.
You okay, bro? You need. Do you need? Can I get you something?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just, it's just like a blind assumption that everything that you have a word for actually exists, whereas, some of them are just beings of reason or verbal constructs, right? Like, I
Yeah.
could talk about square circles all day.
Yeah.
It's real easy. Just, oh yeah, I saw a square circle, but I didn't because they don't exist. That's just a meaningless
Right.
verbal construct. So,
Well, and that's the thing. You can put anything in any frame you want. It's really not that hard. 3-year-olds do it all the time. Actually, if you hang out with 3-year-olds, you can hear them do this. It's really common. This is what puzzles me. I'm like, are you like, have you just never been around a three? They do this all the time. All the time. You can put everything in master slave or father son or mother daughter, like any frame you want. You can do that. It's really not that hard. Like literally anyone can do that. Also wrong, by the way, but you see, there's the rebellion, right? Is in trying to do that, and I don't think that's covered under your list.
well, it's almost like you're going back a stage there. Because once you've decided that you're not going to follow after God, that's like kind of the initial stage of rebellion. So this is more like what follows after that, because you have to be oriented towards something, otherwise you don't move. So it's like,
Oh, wait, I don't no, that's not true. No, that's actually absolutely false. People move all the time without being oriented. That's the problem. Is this is why the emergence is good people think they have a point, right? Because they go, something emerged. And I'm like, yeah, but that's gonna happen. Like that, that's a constant in the world, right? Because technically entropy looks like emergence to you, right? So not all the time, but like it does. And so the fact that that happens isn't really interesting because it is a universal, right? And that's the problem is that people get caught up with, oh, well, people are moving. Well, yeah, you can't not move, then you're dead, technically. Like this is the technical definition. And so the fact that you're moving, I mean, you can't be oriented all the time or orienting all the time, because you can't. And most people are admittedly, by their own admission, lost. What does that mean? That means I don't know where I'm moving. That
sure,
doesn't
and I
mean
would
I'm
think
not
I would
moving.
think that they would, just by force of gravity, move towards, hedonism.
Well,
The body
okay.
will just draw you
o-
there.
Okay, but again, the yeah, or desire or something. But
Yeah.
again, the engagement with rebelling against things in favor of yourself, right, which would include your desires, I think was not included in your list, and is the big thing. Like I think that's really the problem. Is that's the form of the most common form of rebellion, like right now in the world, which could be stated as a rebellion against hierarchy or a rebellion against the other, right, or anything outside of yourself, right, things like that.
Yeah, I'm tending to think that there has to be some kind of a motivation before we get to an action there. And but
All
now I'm
right,
getting
well, let's.
myself all tangled up here because,
Mm. I bet you are.
yeah, well, hey, we're here to think things out, right? And
Yeah.
while I defend, Aquinas to the death, I might not always be using him properly.
Mm.
So
Or
so
you
it
might
is
be
worth.
wrong about something. Everyone's wrong about something.
Yeah, and he was wrong about the Immaculate Conception. We've got that covered. So
You might be wrong about 2 things. It's possible.
it's very statistically unlikely.
I thought I was wrong once, but actually I was just mistaken, so happens.
It's it's sort of like, so the context, maybe we go back to the context. This was from the second part of the first part of the second part, where Thomas Aquinas begins to treat of, we'll say, man's telos as such, right? What are human beings for? Why are we doing this? That's where we get this list from, is, wealth, power, status,
Mhm.
pleasure. I added
Right.
destruction in there because I knew
Mhm.
uh, you would add that, and we could have that conversation again if we really need to. And so
I
the
appreciate that, Father, by the way.
yeah, um, you can either point yourself properly, aiming to glorify God, or you'll go off to one of these other directions there.
Mhm.
Um, and so it seems like the decision to not orient yourself towards the highest, towards God, has to be motivated by being dazzled by something else, which is not God, but is maybe bigger than you are. Um, and
Yeah,
so
but
you
if
could
it's
be,
motivated, and what I'm saying is it's not motivated. In fact, the lack of motivation is a rebellion. And I think this is the sort of Catholic presumption, right? This is part of the set of presumptions that causes the problem when you're arguing with atheists in particular, right? Is a set of presumptions about God and creation and proper telos. It's like if they don't have that, then they can't be doing the things you're accusing them of because it's not there for them.
They don't have what?
They don't have the presumption of the motivation. Like objective material reality as such states like in the objective material world, there is no motivation. It can't exist there at all. There's some
Right.
people
It's
who
just a
believe the
chemical
science would
reaction.
say otherwise, but actually they can't prove it because it can't be there. Otherwise, it's not objective anymore. And they, then they run into a problem, right? But they are in the objective material reality frame. I mean, that's where you get crazy talk from like John Vervaeke saying, "Oh, evolution has no telos." It's like, okay, bro, maybe, but that's not going to solve your problem. You just moved it. But sure, whatever. I mean, I can make that work. That's easy. But it doesn't get around telos, which is like his goal is to get around telos. It's like, but that's not going to happen though.
Sure. I think even if somebody's stuck in an objective material reality framework, they're still going to have motivations coming out sideways, which is why they're what? More susceptible to possession by bad ideas,
Okay,
possession by evil
well, but
spirits.
I don't disagree. Let's examine what that looks like. What would you do? You might say, "Oh, money's bad, so I'm not going to take any money." Right? Because I know money's in, we'll say, a negative motivator or something in this framework, right? I'm not going to destroy things because that's bad, right? So, I mean, you can go all the way down the list of five you listed, and you could take a look at somebody like, well, I don't know, John Vervaeke or even Jordan Peterson, because I'd argue he's in the same boat. Um, they're not doing any of those five things, and they're also not telotic towards God. So, what's going on there? They're still doing stuff. And I would say there's your rebellion against things outside, right? And they're just using the scientific justification, such as that is, which is garbage, but different topic.
You don't see that as just a subsection of power then? Like they want to be the ones who are in charge, so they're taking the power.
No, they aren't though. I mean, explicitly, right? Because they're so worried about becoming Hitler that they're saying we don't want power, we don't want leadership, we don't want to be in control of anything. Explicitly, they're saying that. And that's actually a problem because that's actually what they should be doing. Good men need to take control, right? I mean, and the way you're describing power, just to be clear, and you can object, if you want, but what I'm hearing is control through force or threat of force, which is very
Yeah, I'm
common
not.
definition.
I'm not sure. Yeah, yeah, and that might not be what Aquinas would mean by power, because he's
I
speaking in
bet he
Latin,
doesn't
right?
have a definition either.
Uh, uh,
I feel like if he did, I'd have heard it. Maybe not though. I could be totally wrong on that.
Happiness is the perfect good, but power is most imperfect. For as Boethius says, the power of man cannot relieve the gnawings of care, nor can it avoid the thorny pain of anxiety. You think a man is powerful who is surrounded by attendants who he inspires with fear indeed, but whom he fears still more?
If he fears them, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and he may have to, but different problem. But that's control through fear, through force or threat of force, right? Because that's what fear is, threat of force.
So power has the nature of principle, as is stated in Metaphysics, Book 12. So it's something that starts at the beginning. I'll have to read about this later because sitting
Nah,
here watching me read something is not thrilling television.
true. Nah. Um, if those guys said that, they're all wrong. That's easy. I can prove that takes nothing.
Okay.
Um, power, but power is really easy to define, right? It's time, energy, and attention, uh, ordered and focused.
Geez, we're translating a Latin word potestas into English. It's going to change in translation. So
It can, but it doesn't
because
have to.
it's related to potential.
Well, power is the ability to manifest a particular potential.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. But how you do that is directed time, energy, and attention, or focused time, energy, attention. I'm using focused and ordered, I think now. That was my as of yesterday, by the way. So, I'm not claiming I had that, that dialed in until yesterday, because I think it was yesterday. Like, because I was always using focus. I'm like, it's not focus. Like focus, yes, but not just focus. Right? It's always I always need another word, right? But if you look at something like nominalism, I can't. I don't understand the world. So I was watching a video. Somebody put something on Twitter and said this particular guy, I don't even remember his name right now, is it's great. You should listen to him. And then I noticed he had talked to Pageau, and he'd been around, talking to Vanderklay and a few other people. And I he's got his own YouTube channel. So I checked out this particular video. It's an hour and 50 minutes, and the problem, he's one of these problem of today, culture war. And I'm like, my least favorite framing. And so I did tweet out today based on that. Uh, basically, I'm tired of people saying we're divided. I think that's inaccurate and imprecise framing. The problem is we're fractured, right? Everyone's running in a different direction. It's not side A against side B, or all sides against side A. It's not even that. It really is a fracturing.
Mhm.
Right. And then you could imagine if you wanted to do this backwards. See, I happen to be highly dyslexic, which I think is now a superpower and not a disadvantage at all. So if you wanted to look at that backwards, and you were, I don't know, some goofy thing like Catholic, you could go ahead and say, well, yeah, if you're not all pointed towards God, then things are going to fracture, and then you can pull out Tower of Babel or whatever to sort of prove that, right? Um, and you would think, oh, no, 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 they all have the same language, and you misunderstood the story, but whatever. I won't get into that. That's proof is too long. Um, but ultimately, what the guy was mentioning was nominalism. And so he said, we haven't worked out the realist versus the nominalist case. And I was like, there's a binary, right? That's stupid. No one's a nominalist. His description of nominalism to me was like, that's not what the nominalist said. But a new point wasn't wrong enough, but it was annoying enough to be incorrect. Like, no, it's not. The way you're framing that is not what Duns Scotus or Occam said. So I don't. It wasn't just we throw names on things and therefore, right? But this is the same point you're making, right? Like the idea that I can just throw a name on something. Like I could say something like social justice, okay? And people don't realize that's a trick, and it cannot, not does not, cannot ever under any circumstances make any sense, right? Because there's no such thing as a society without justice, and you don't need justice outside of society. So the idea of social justice is taking two things that are already together and cramming them together. They're already contained within one another, right? And so they already operate at the same layer of reality. You can't just throw two things at the same layer of reality together. They're already together, right? So you're doing something strange with the language, and what that does to your brain when you hear it is you go, well, of course, because you want to cooperate with the other person and believe that they're communicating to you in a meaningful way. So what happens is you insert the meaning, but because you inserted it, you don't mean what they mean. You can't. The odds are astronomically against that.
And then we have the Tower of Babel, where people are speaking different languages.
Exactly. That's right. That's where the Tower of Babel story. That's what the Tower of Babel story actually says. They're using the same words, that aspect of language, but they're not using the same concepts attached to those words, that aspect of language. It's like,
Mhm, mhm.
oh, because language isn't one thing.
Very
Everybody
easy.
reduces language to this one magical thing. Actually, what people do is they equate language and thought, which is just a stupid mistake that everybody makes. Noam Chomsky makes it. It's really prevalent everywhere. And I'm like, you guys are dumb.
Because
It's just
thought
stupid.
thought is bigger than language.
It has to come first. Like, there's no question about it. Is that this is why I'm like, really? That's the thing you don't understand? It's like, this should be abundantly clear. No, and like, you can go in and what, "It's hard to know," but Helen Keller, we're done here. I don't even like, she was like the poster child for the fact that that way of thinking was wrong. Well documented, but I read it. You could too. Like, I don't understand.
We've all seen the movie. We were made to watch it in elementary school.
Yeah, but there's actually an important paper, and I read it a billion years ago in the before time. In fact, like a long ass time ago, about the because there was a debate. Like, it, she can't be able to think. Like, they actually wrote that because they were like, she doesn't have speech and she can't hear, so thought isn't an option. Which, again, that should already be obviously false. Sorry, like, I don't. The way you could have come to that conclusion is by being extremely stupid or fooling yourself a lot. But whatever, be that as it may, Helen Keller just proved the whole thing immediately, and it's
Because she could,
documented.
because when she learned how to speak, she could speak about what it was like before she knew how to speak.
No, she had advanced concepts in her head that she was just talking about once she could communicate correctly.
Yeah, yeah.
So the
It-
communication, it's not language. Communication of any form is not required for thought. Period. Full stop. End of
mhm,
argument. Completely
mhm.
proven. 100% by
And
observation, well documented in everything. Like, I don't even. This is why I'm always like, I can't help you people. I
well,
just can't.
I mean, this is making me think of the McGilchrist stuff where you've got the left brain, which is
Yep.
wants discrete little parts of
Right.
everything and can actually, is very much handling language a lot because
Right.
it can do language very quickly. Apparently, it's specialized for that.
Yep.
And then the right brain, where it's more what continuous, but not easily reducible into language, right? Just
Right.
uh, uh,
What opens up? One opens up, one closes down.
yeah, they
I
both have
mean,
their
yeah.
uses. But when and he makes the point, in Master and His Emissary, which I think is a pretty good book. Um, of like a continual dominance of the left over the right to the detriment of us all because you really actually the stuff that it was in there that was most frightening was his case studies about people who had um right brain tumors versus left brain tumors, and the folks who had the right brain tumors were like stripped of their personality and their
Mhm.
ability to function in the
Right.
world, but they could sit there and speak and like put together grammatically correct sentences,
Yep.
and speak coherently like that. But with some of the cases, they'd say, "Well, what's that? Oh, that's an arm. Well, whose arm is it? Oh, I don't know, because
Right.
the right left brain couldn't conceive of the right side of the body,
Yep. Yep.
something like that. Couldn't
Yep.
no, the left brain couldn't conceive of the left side of the body. That's what it was. Because it's kind of trapped in its own little virtual sandbox there. Which that I mean, when I was reading that stuff, it kind of gave me the chills there. Whereas
Yeah.
people who have left brain uh, strokes, they can they can function better. They're there, they're in the environment. They oftentimes have trouble speaking, which is unfortunate and almost certainly very frustrating, but they're present and cognizant in their environment there. Um, so I'm sure that's all baked into the fabulous navigating patterns model.
It is. Yeah, the knowledge engine model on navigating patterns has all of those concepts. Yeah, McGilchrist makes some basic mistakes that everybody makes on the measurements because no one ever accounts for the observer problem. So for whatever reason,
No, no,
um,
science fixed that. Science fixed that, Mark.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sabine Hassenfelder, she talks about it. Nope, and physics doesn't know these things. You got Everybody thinks physics knows these. Physicists don't know these. They know they don't know these. You just ask them, they'll be like, "Yeah, no, we don't know. We don't have a solution for that." You know, but McGilchrist keeps talking about dominance, one hemisphere over the other, on the basis of what the experiments that he's or at least some of them that he's looking at, that everyone's looking at. It's not just him. Everybody makes this freaking basic mistake. It's a mistake a data scientist would never make, hopefully, or a good one. Um, they're measuring, they're measuring brain activity, but they're also talking to the person. And so what happens is it double measures the right side because
Double measures the right side?
yeah. I'm sorry, the left side. It double
Okay.
measures it double measures the left side. So it goes to the right side once, and then it goes to the left side twice, and they go, "Ah! The left side has dominance over the." That isn't what happened at all. That's just an
Well,
affectation of the
I
observation
don't
data.
think that's what McGilchrist I don't remember him saying that. What I
Oh, yeah,
remember
he
him
says
s
that.
he did? Okay, I
Oh,
must
yeah,
have
he says
missed
it
it
all over the
because
place.
because
Yeah.
the point I got is, like, culturally and personally, philosophically, all of the other lees that you need to think of that we're favoring the left hemisphere over the right hemisphere, the kind of things that are knowable in the left hemisphere, um, because it gives us control,
Right, but it
or at least
doesn't.
the illusion of control.
Right, and it also doesn't do that, which is why everyone's going insane right now.
Right.
But that's the thing that John Vervaeke talks about with propositional tyranny too. It's like,
Mhm.
yes, it's like it's hard, right? Because I have to agree on one level and disagree on another level. It's not propositional tyranny. There is a propositional tyranny. That's not the thing. That's the result of something else, right? Which is lots of the poetic way of informing the world, right? So
Mhm.
you're preferring to inform yourself about the world by using propositions, right? Which means that when you are your own authority, when you're rebelling against things outside of yourself, you're naming things. And the problem with your naming things is that your names and my names cannot match. It's almost impossible for that to happen. And so that breaks cooperation, right? And then everything looks to me like it's opponent processing. But you and I, Father, are not opponents, are we?
It depends on what you mean by the word opponent.
No, I mean we cooperate. That's what we do. It doesn't mean we always agree. It doesn't mean we don't take oppositional roles, but it's known and it's part of cooperation. And in some sense, when you do that, we'll say without, you know, suddenly without letting me know first, that's hysterical, right? Like that's what it is. Because everybody knows just from our interactions that we're not opponents. And so it's really funny, right? When you pull that trick on somebody. And there's nothing wrong. It's hysterical. I enjoy it, right? If somebody unexpectedly does that, um, right? And it can be sarcastic or it can be totally serious, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But that's if you have a negative valence, you'll see that as opposition and not a form of cooperation, right?
So there's no opponent processing, but people who are cooperating can have opposing roles. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, but they don't. Like I think opposition is just this thing that everybody states that is an affectation of you thinking that you know how you think. Because opposition is an inherently binary frame, and that those aren't real. Binaries aren't real. Computers are built on binary. That's what they're built on.
Therefore, computers aren't real. Got it.
Computers definitely aren't real. That is for sure. But because all they are reflections of other things.
Uh,
I mean,
uh,
ultimately, in order to make a binary system work, and this may not be true for analog computers because that's an area where I'm a little fuzzy on because I haven't built one from scratch yet. But binary computers have built a ton of those, like from electronic parts and stuff for real. So like I really do understand that pretty darn well. Um, when you build them, you have to put everything into it, and
mhm.
you have no idea how much goes into like an operating system that can do anything. I had to abort an attempt to write an email program once, and that's very high level. But I mean, I've written very basic operating. In fact, I have the book over there somewhere.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and so, I mean, even the we even had to put the logic on which
right.
they work into the systems, yeah.
You have to layer the binary logic on top of the hardware logic that's already layered into the system.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody understands that.
Well, that's arcane nonsense from the '70s, we don't have to understand it. It's just
Right.
built into everything now.
Right, and that's why, because people get into these weird sort of autistic technical arguments about, "Well, we shouldn't be using silicon wafers, we should use gallium arsenide," and I agree. Gallium arsenide is awesome. The problem with gallium arsenide, last time I checked, this might not may still not be true, was you could only do 4 gates, and so the problem was for the same amount of surface area, because you can only do 4 types of gates, you get less computing power. It's a bad analog. It's the closest that you can do. Computing power per square millimeter. And so, so maybe 30% less power, but it ends up being the same amount of power because in order to do the same number of operations, you actually need more wafer and therefore more power, and right on and on and on. Which isn't entirely true. I mean, gallium arsenide ultimately does take less power, but it's not the 30% that you get, we'll say, by analyzing the base layer of how much power for substrate, blah, because it doesn't work that way. But all of the circuits on the chip actually stack up into circuits. They're not even circuits technically, but like the actual digital circuits on the chip actually have logical stack ups, like ORs and exclusive ORs and ANDs and all these operations that you use to manipulate registers, right? Storage units, bit storage units, and then that layers up to even larger operations, right? Which are based on a logic, and that layers up to even larger operations based on logic, and then you get to program. Like, and I'm talking about machine code,
Yeah, yeah.
which you don't want to do, by the way. I can. I'm not good at it. I was never good at it, but I can do it. I have done it. It's
But
just
there's
a
a reason
pain.
people
It's
don't.
a nightmare. It's a complete nightmare. I've gone in and hex edited stuff to fix it, and
Yeah,
you
yeah.
don't want to do that. I've gone in and had to hex edit something where you had to make a number of different edits because the change here actually, if you have to shift the bits in everything and then make another hole and then make another hole to make that work, because you're technically reverse engineering at that point. I've had to do that. It's
Sounds boring.
I don't do it anymore. Believe me. If I had to, I could again, but I don't know. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that ever again if I can
S
avoid it.
so, at the danger of opposing you, can I ask a question? Um, what do you make of the fact that there are men and women?
I mean, I don't make
Is
anything
that a
of it other than
binary? Is that a
other
binary?
no, it's actually the smallest possible unit.
A family? Family is the smallest possible unit, is that what you're saying? Or
Yeah.
and so you get 1 plus 1 equals 1. 1 man plus 1 woman equals 1 family.
Well, how many cells plus how many cells equals one person then? It's a silly question at some point
I know,
because you're
I know.
comparing apples and oranges at that point.
Understood, understood, understood. Yeah, I wasn't I'm not gonna double down on that statement.
No, you can, well, I mean, you can try, but yeah. I mean, the smallest possible survivable unit is technically a family.
And so
And
you actually have 3 things here. You've got the man and the woman and then the family above it?
no, you've got
Well,
the unit of the family. Inside
which
that
has
unit, just like
which
in
has
your body you have cells, inside
okay,
that unit, you have one man and one woman.
those are the parts that make it up.
Those are
Okay,
the parts that make up the whole, right? And so
yes.
it's a and this is
Which
the
can be
problem,
added to when they have children. Okay.
right? And this is the problem. Like, people don't understand containers, which is the thing that Manuel and I were on for years, that we kind of just couldn't get across to people. Like, because the individuals or people who are trying to be individuals, which is an impossible situation, they when you're trying to be an individual, you're trying to live in objective material reality, and you're trying to live in OMR, which doesn't exist. But even if it did, it wouldn't be useful to you. Like, Even if it existed, it doesn't solve a problem or fix a thing or change anything about the world, right? So that is an invalid way to think about the world. What happens is you get lonely, right? Like you get upset because you've separated yourself on purpose from everybody else because you won't be part of a container. Because people, the place where you would meet people is in a container. Could be a house, it could be a city, it could be a church, it could be a club, it could be work. Those are all containers, right? But it has to be something bigger than you. If you
Yeah,
can't meet
yeah.
somebody in a container the size of you, that makes no sense. So if you
Mhm.
reduce the container to you, which would be individualism, you're going to separate yourself from everything else. And you could argue those things are still there, yes, but you separated yourself from them rather than included yourself in them. And no wonder why you think opponent processing is a valid way to think about the world.
It's amazing that both you've managed to recreate certain aspects of Catholic social teaching, which just means how we organize societies, teaching about how we organize society. Is that cool? Are we okay with that? Can we say
Yeah,
social teaching
yeah, yeah.
and certain aspects of Jewish thought right there?
No, social teaching is important, right? Because
Yeah.
people think people when you try to be scientific, when you try to live in this objective material reality, in this OMR world, uh, what happens is you cannot understand something like social except to modify it, right? Or to believe that it is just some like side effect of the fact of more than one person. And while it is more than one person, and all things that involve more than one person are of a social aspect or have a certain social aspect, society has to, it doesn't make any sense if it isn't formed. Right? Like it doesn't.
Society doesn't make any sense that it is informed. So it could just be, hey guys, we're going to play softball. Boom, society formed.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't operate at that low level, but like you could say that the way society works in England and the way society works in the US is different. And you could get crazy. You could say the Midwest versus the East Coast or the West Coast are all different, sure. Versus North versus South, right? Those are different societies, right? But I mean, they're within a larger societal ethos in the US, right? But there's no crossover at all between the US and the UK in that way. Like those are totally different societies, right? Right down to the language. Like the freaking English, man, they talk funny. They kind of they just talk weird. They got all kinds of different terms. They've got phrases that mean negative things in our parlance and positive things in theirs. That's how different the societies are, right? And now you can spin society again, right? If you have this weird definition, you can say, well, we're all part of Western society. It's like, well, and this is why people go, well, the West is having a problem or breaking up, and it's like the problems in Europe, continental Europe, the problems in the UK, and the problems in the US are all actually different problems. The manifestations are the same, sure, but let's imagine this. Let's imagine there's four right ways to have culture, right, cohere together, or 12, right? More than one, less than an arbitrary number, right? Less than 20. How's that? Okay? All that means is that if any single contagion that could affect all of those ways of having culture hits those cultures, they're all going to look like they have the same problem. But also, if any other contagion, let's suppose there's 100 different contagions that can destroy culture. If they each get a different one, it's actually all going to look like the culture is being destroyed, right? It's an asymmetrical relationship, right? Where destruction by any means looks the same, but that doesn't mean it's the same type of destruction. And I think that's actually the problem, is that we assume that since we're seeing the same end result, or we can see the same end result, I'd argue we're not seeing the same end result, different argument, right? We can casted as the same end result, that it must be the same cause. And that's actually wrong. That almost never happens. Like if I have a fever, do I have a cold or do I have the flu? Like it's real easy. Like you don't know because you can't know because a cold or a flu can cause a fever. I don't know what else
So
to tell
can
you.
an infection, so can the
Could be a
COVID.
bacterial infection.
It
Right. Like almost everything when you're sick manifests with 4 basic symptoms, right? And it's always 4 symptoms, but that tells you nothing about the cause. And people are seeing these symptoms of cultural collapse and saying they must have the same cause. And I'm like, no, you must be stupid because the odds of that are actually small. And
Yeah,
and there's the rebellion, right? Like all rebellion looks the same. Right? So I've used this example before. Maybe it'll resonate better in this context. If you look at a riot, you can say, "Oh, people are rioting," and then you can say they're rioting for social justice. Okay, but what happens in a riot is you have different groups with completely different goals all causing chaos. The chaos looks the same, right? So, in a riot in Portland, and there were several of these riots, you've got a bunch of people literally firebombing, throwing Molotov cocktails at a federal building. Into that milieu, now those guys are just anti-government anarchists or something, and then
mhm,
maybe
mhm.
even they don't all have the same goal in doing that, right? It doesn't.
The anarchists aren't able to organize?
Yeah. But it doesn't even matter because I'm gonna go a different tact with it. I'm gonna say, and this is documented. I'm not making this up. This happened. You can just go look, right? There's a bunch of people that go there that don't throw Molotov cocktails, don't care about the government, are trying to get arrested explicitly. No, no.
Trying to get arrested.
We're
Okay.
joining in the chaos so we can get arrested. Well, because then they're social justice heroes. Right? They're trying to play out the hero who was at the scene, who got arrested, and because that happened in the civil rights movement all the time, and so they'll be Martin Luther King too, right? Like that's literally their goal. It's their stated goal. That's what's happening. They're trying to use that to cash it in and everything for status. Then there's a bunch of people down the street breaking store windows and stealing stuff. Right? This is hey Xander. This is all
Hey,
part of the riot. But they all have different goals, all 3 of those groups, and there's more than that, but those are
There's
the 3
just people who
easiest.
are just there because it looks like fun, people who just kinda wanna
No,
break something.
yeah.
chaos is potential because it's the breakdown of order, and so now here's your chance to reorder the blocks.
And you get a chance to pillage what already exists. That's the
Right.
other thing, right? So that
Yeah.
there's profit in iconoclasty,
Well,
right? If
there
you
right. Well, there can be, right? Or at least it looks like that to you, which is why you get involved when you go into the chaos, which is very dangerous, by the way, because if a conservative comes around, they'll shoot you, which maybe they should. Let's
yeah,
maintain a little order, right? That's the problem is that both things are true at the same time. Now, one is arguably better than the other. I think everybody knows which side I fall on because I just kind of tip my hand there. Order good, chaos bad. It's not that hard. But it looks like a riot, and we label it a riot, and it is a riot, and it's a useful a label that we should not do away with, right? But we try to play that trick with an awful lot of words without realizing what's implied in that.
Because rioting in France just seems like it's just different, right? Like,
Oh,
they
you mean
just seem to do it a
Tuesday?
lot.
You mean Tuesday?
I Yeah, it's Tuesday
Yeah,
there,
it's
right? And
Tuesday.
whereas, like,
Every Tuesday.
rioting in a US city is like, "Holy mackerel," like, but it's
So,
like they do these big, so I'm trying to
mhm.
get a contrast of things because you said the causes of decline in continental Europe versus the causes of decline in the United States are different.
Yeah.
So the rioting's probably gotta be different too.
No,
I'm not gonna pretend we
well,
can
but
talk about
actually, it's
France.
backwards, right? They are rioting, right? The nature of their riot is a little bit. Not all our riots are the same, right? But the nature of their riots is different. But we still call it rioting. Maybe we shouldn't,
so
right?
I just put a link into the for Father Eric there to a site called Beautiful Trouble, which is the updated online version of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals.
Oh, good Lord. Oh,
And you can see that,
yeah.
they have
Since a
the
target rarely gives in after one action, it is often necessary to
Yep.
strategically increase the pressure on them in a step-by-step escalation that draws upon a diverse mix of tactics.
Yep.
and you could go through like go through the principles section, for example. You can see that there's a whole they have stories, tactics.
They're following
Uh,
a playbook.
yeah,
One of
they're
the
writing a
playbooks is written by
very
Saul Alinsky.
sophisticated
Right.
playbook, right? So when you see the the student protests, and then he's putting a bit of square quotes on it, across campuses, all in support of Palestine, ostensibly. There are they're professional protesters who are coordinating or organizing these protests, right? And they use a sophisticated playbook. So I think
Yeah.
like Mark's 100% correct that that there's all sorts of different causes. There's all sorts of issues that they'll use to find to create division, right? So for example, like like they explicitly target race in the United States.
Mhm.
They use tactics that are largely from China and the communist revolution there. Race wasn't the issue there. There were race issues against the Han Chinese, but it wasn't the wedge issue. It wasn't the fracture point that it is in America, right? So in America, when they're trying to disrupt the existing order and the existing infrastructure, they target the weak points.
Right.
So they target the fractions. But there's behind it. So I'm agreeing with Mark in the sense of that. Like, so there's definitely in Europe, the issues that they're targeting have their own flavors and characteristics. In the United States, has their own flavors and characteristics. Nonetheless, there's this higher order system or intent that goes over it, right? And you can and they have a sophisticated blade, and there's people who profit off of controlled decline, right? That when the key is that it's essentially a form of pillaging. But if they
Yeah.
can, because if they can anticipate how the degradation will happen and when it can occur, they can they can be
You don't need that, Xander. You don't need that.
That's
All change has the opportunity for profit. All change.
Yeah, all change does, but
right. But you don't need to predict it to profit from it either. Like that's like
well, if you want to
max
optimize your profiting from it, and that's like the whole.
Yeah, but almost look, I've done consulting for some of the largest companies in the world. They can't optimize for anything, much less profit. They definitely cannot optimize for profit.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been there, like saving them lots of money. They don't even care. Like they're not even trying to optimize for profit. People do not optimize for profit very often.
Well,
and when they try, they fail because it's too hard.
Optimize for being on the winning side, right? It depends what you say. George Soros does this all the time, right? That's his whole alchemy of finance. Is he creates he targets dynamic systems and says like, so there's biases within this system,
right?
And if I can just, and it's essentially chaos theory. If I can just seeing where the weaknesses are and the biases are, if I can then push one bias or one system out of the dynamic equilibrium such that I create chaos, and I'm then in a position to anticipate how this chaos will play out or direct the change that will result from this chaos.
Right. But you actually don't have to direct it. That's what I'm saying. Is that's actually not required at all. This is like one of those things that people think you require too much information to do very simple things that actually just requires tiny bits of information.
Okay, well, here's another way of looking at it, right? If you want to say I'm someone who's going to try and profit off of a system, I can try and make it better, right? I can say there's a complex system like an Apache helicopter. I can try and make that Apache helicopter better, or if I also want an easier way to evoke change, is to make it worse. Right?
Yeah, but you can't.
There's there's a million ways to make it worse.
Yeah, but you're presuming better and worse exist. and they actually kind of don't. That's really the problem. Like,
do you-
better for what? Right? Because it's the T-loss actually matters, because if you make it better for something, you're gonna make it worse for something else at the same time. It's just the
Yeah, but
nature of things that are built.
yeah, well, okay, but
How do you
if
make an Apache helicopter better? Do you put one more person in it? Like,
well,
do you redesign
I'm
it
just
so it
using it
can
as an
fit
as
more
an example
people?
of complex
Or do you
system.
redesign it so it can fit more bullets? Or do you redesign it so it can have more
Yeah,
missiles? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what's better?
well, there's different ways or different optimization solutions, but it could be optimized for the existing thing. But it's presuming that there's always a like that there is a that you can't hit an optimum, certainly, right? But
Yeah, but you also can't know what better is.
you might have like a local
But
optimism.
you can't know what better is. That's the problem. And you can't actually know what worse is, because most of the problem now is people are making changes,
You can
believing they're making
definitely.
things better, and they're making them worse by mistake.
I think you can know what better and worse is. Absolutely, but
Sometimes some people can know that, right? But almost nobody can. And that's really where but everybody thinks they can, because everybody thinks it's obvious, right? Like,
well,
it's
it's certainly not obvious, but
well,
it's
no, but everybody thinks it's obvious, Andrew.
Mhm.
That's my point. And that's
Okay.
actually my whole point, is everybody believes that they know enough to make anything, any random thing at all better, or
Mhm.
some number of things better. Okay. They're almost certainly wrong about that.
Yes.
That's the problem, right? But then we tell them they can, or we give them the ability to try, and they just make everything worse. I mean, you see this at Disney. Like, you can
Mhm.
argue that, like, Disney has some grand scheme, and Bob Iger knows what Bob Iger's an idiot. He has no idea what he's doing. I can guarantee you that. That's just
Okay.
evident from the data. What he's done is he's put people in charge, right, of different projects who are equally incompetent, if not more incompetent, and they are skewing towards certain things because that's the way the world is. It's
Well,
like the gravity
so
that Father Eric talked
and
about.
that's what I was pointing out is
It looks
is
deliberate, though. It
is
looks like a plan, but it's actually not.
well, I think the plan there's a plan for a personal betterment, right? Or they are sort of crabs in a
But
bucket
they
of
don't all
sorts, right?
have the same
So
plan. They don't
scrambling.
even
Although they don't
remotely.
have the same plan, but they don't need to, right?
Well, that
So,
right.
for
That's my
example,
point.
like on the let's go back to the Palestinian student protests, right?
Mhm.
The George Soros and the CPP are existential enemies, right? They don't they hate each other, right? They want they both
Maybe
they
I have no
desire their
idea.
destruction, okay? But
I
nonetheless,
I doubt that.
they're both
George
funding.
Soros is friend to all evil, as near as explicitly, but sure,
Well, yeah,
whatever.
he's funding chaos, but the
Evil.
CPP actually has like a nationalist interest, right? They actually want to create a certain sort of order with them on the top, right? They want to bring
A
back the
certain
divine
kind of
kingdom.
evil? Yes.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
okay,
George
yeah.
Soros wants the same thing, by the way,
No, he
explicitly.
doesn't.
Oh,
He
no,
thinks
no, he wants a one world government. Yeah, he's all into that.
okay. He says he wants a one world government,
Oh,
but
yeah, he
if you
certainly
actually,
does.
but his one world government is so utopian. Like his theory of that, you can tell that what he really just wants is to see the world burn. Right? If you actually look at it, he's really demonic.
That's the end result of trying to get a one world government. That's a different problem. This is
But
what I'm saying.
okay,
People think they can get what they want, but actually you can't.
I don't think he's a delusional megalomaniac, so maybe he does believe on some level. He soothes his conscience, but I don't.
He's a
like
true
if you
believer.
look at what the open society actually is targeting, right? It's a complete pipe dream. But this is why the CPP is an enemy, is an existential enemy, and they see that is because Soros tries to instigate his plan in China, and China doesn't want Soros to instigate his plan in China. So that's why they're existential enemies, right? He doesn't.
Maybe not. But I mean, that doesn't make
But they're enemies in that regard. Well, nonetheless.
Well, with respect to China,
my other point was that they're both funding the student protests. the policy, because they have a shared interest in
They have a common
the
enemy.
common enemy of the United States, right?
Right.
And they're not even really
Right.
coordinating. It's
Because
not like they're like
the common enemy is anti-world government, which the United States is
Yeah.
anti-world government,
yes,
right?
but it also
Right.
is
But they want the same
nationalist.
thing.
I don't think
want
they.
the
No,
same
no,
thing.
no. I don't think that
They want exactly the same
China
thing.
wants to
They just
dominate. Soros wants no one to dominate.
No, Soros wants to dominate. He wants to be the person who picks the president.
Well,
of
what
the
are we
world
what are we
government.
picking? He wants to profit. He's obsessed with
He doesn't
the
want to
profiting
profit.
on nothing.
No, he does not want to profit. No, he
He's
doesn't.
already had the profit.
No,
He
but I mean,
wastes way more money than you can imagine. He has no interest in profit. What he has an interest in
the
is
profit for him
controlling
is
who the
power.
president of the one world government is. He's almost said exactly that in multiple interviews.
That's not what it's not what he's in like. That's what he says in the finance, the alchemy of finance book, and that's not what he's.
I'm sure that's not what he says. Look, I've watched him in interviews. He almost exactly says that multiple interviews over the years. For real, like actually, right? Like yeah, he wants to control who the president is of the one world government, and so the only way that he conflicts with China is who's one world government.
Yeah, no, I agree
is
that
always the problem with
it is. They both they have an incompatible one world government.
My original point is that you can all have quote the same goal, right? Because you can all say I want one world government, but the word government doesn't mean anything all by itself. And so the fact that you want one world government and I want one world government doesn't mean we want anything like the same thing, even though we just use the same words in the same language in the same way.
Yeah,
that's where the problem is. When we take ourselves as an authority on these things and we cut off all possibility of listening to an independent authority, like maybe you and I say, well, the definition of government is whatever, and then we both say, no, we need to defer to a third party like Father Eric here to tell us what the definition of government is so that we can see how well we agree. Because we can't between us see how well we agree. That's actually impossible.
Yeah,
you need a third party to do that.
So I really wanted to come in this weekend to ask Father Eric a question.
Oh, okay.
And here's the question.
I'm done with the one world government. I was never a fan to begin with, so let's go.
That's it. What gives you hope, Father Eric?
What gives me hope?
Is it the fundamental goodness of people and the human heart?
Nope.
You don't. Oh, no, really not. Oh, okay. You don't.
No,
you don't know the reference.
I think good. I don't get that reference.
Okay. I'll tell you after. Let's see the real answer.
The real answer is that God's in charge and I'm not.
Yeah.
That's enough to give me hope right there.
Yeah. So like
that light goes out, who knows, man?
Like the promises of God fulfilled through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, something.
And his return at the end of time. That's important there.
That person yeah. So
anytime now, actually.
Oh, it was what I was referring to as the 60 Minutes interview. One of the clips.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did I just disagree with the Pope? Did you make me do that?
Yeah, I just made you disagree with the Pope.
Okay. All right. Well,
this particular instance of Pope.
Correct.
Yes.
The 60 Minutes
an important
interview.
distinction.
Yeah, a 60 Minutes interview too, not an apostolic constitution, not an ex-Catholic statement. A 60 Minutes interview.
It was him. It was him in a clown outfit doing a clown interview for a clown, as a clown. Sure, absolutely, clowns all the way down in that one. Can confirm.
Yeah. You know what? I just
is he a Protestant? Did we get a Protestant Pope somehow? Because that's what that sounds like to me. Just asking for
canonically, he is
he's the Pope.
Catholic.
He's the Pope. Yeah.
So canon law is what we have to have in between us, Mark. We have to have canon law in between us to adjudicate these disputes.
To cooperate. That's the method of cooperation.
Yeah. And canon law would be very clear that Pope Francis is in fact Catholic. So
Okay.
Mhm.
there you have it.
Was he before he was? Because I got questions. That sounds like the most Protestant
He's
answer to that question you could come up with.
well, I mean, look, I'll just say it. There's a lot of Catholics, and they do all sorts of things. So
There you go.
Yeah.
what can I say? I'm a
Yeah.
Catholic, and sometimes I do things too.
Yeah. Other responses I got is that he gave a very Jesuit answer. It's
A very Jesuit answer. Yeah, well,
Would the
there's something
Jesuits
to
say
that.
that?
The
well,
Jesuits
the-
since the 1960s, probably.
yeah.
Oh, burn them all immediately. Yeah.
No,
I'm-
yeah, you let me
I'm
go
there.
through the list, and I'll pick out the good ones.
Mhm.
The Jesuits, what you got to know is the Jesuits are all extremists, right? They're just extremely extreme people.
Mhm.
And
They,
when
they,
the order got bad, the good ones got extremely good, and all the
yeah.
other ones got extremely bad.
Yeah. I like to say like they're the Jesuits are like the vanguard, like they're always on the periphery,
Right.
right? For
Yeah,
better
they
or for
are.
worse.
That is their role. For sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So depend if they're going
Yeah.
in a good direction. I've met I happen to like only meet the good ones.
Yeah.
It's probably just the circles I run in, weirdos just don't want to hang out with an angry bald priest from the Midwest. So
Sounds good.
I just
Whatever
have that
works.
effect on people.
Whatever works to keep the rabble away. That sounds
I
good.
s- I suppose, yeah, but they're kind of in free fall right now in terms of,
Yeah.
global population, admissions, that kind of thing.
Really
Is
interesting.
Yeah, yeah, largest men's religious order in the world, all kind of collapsing. Meanwhile, the Dominicans on the East Coast are thriving
Mhm.
because they wear their habits and study Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah.
Is that why? Okay. Well,
And
And, like
it's an old
like,
rivalry
it's
too.
so stupidly easy to get the vocations nowadays. You just wear your habits and read Thomas Aquinas,
Yeah.
and you'll have vocations coming out of your ears. You won't know what to do with all of them.
that's funny.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
it. Yeah, it's an old rivalry though too, right? Between the Dominicans and the Jesuits. Going
And
back.
it got
Yeah.
pretty heated in the late 16th, early 17th century. We talked about that on a previous live stream, the Molinist controversy. And the Dominicans were right on that one. Just in case you were wondering, Molinism is well, it's very Jesuitical. Like, no, no, God like doesn't know the universe, the future as it is. He has this middle knowledge whereby he knows what you would do in a certain situation, so that he will give you the grace because he knows what you would do if you were given that grace, and therefore, yeah, his grace is efficacious, but your will is still free. And the Dominicans are like, ah, yeah, God's free and we're free, and our freedom exists on different levels, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying as a
Think so.
human to understand concepts like time and freedom from the perspective we can never inhabit is a waste of your time, energy, and attention, and unnecessary for your life. Why bother?
Well,
Pragmatism, pragmatism for the win.
and usually extremely distressing.
Mhm.
Well, right. That's the problem. People don't. Why is everybody anxious? That's why, right?
Yeah, because it's like I can talk about all kinds of the mysteries of the faith that I don't have any comprehension of, right? The
Right.
Trinity, incarnation, the church, the sacraments, and some of the things I'm just like, yeah, I don't know, God makes it work, right? But the second you get into, efficacious grace, salvation, and free will, like that one really cooks your brain and freaks you out when you start coming to the conclusions. So I was actually told by a professor just to not write a paper on that. I had proposed a paper topic. He's like, it's either going to be very short and simple and not worth your time, or you'll go nuts in all the details. So just stay away from it. Like, oh boy, Usually, if you had an ambitious paper, this guy was like, "Yeah, go for it." So
Mhm.
he was holding me back for my own good. My
Well,
own
see,
good.
that's what we need. We need people to hold us back for our own good. But when we rebel against people, we see them as opposition instead of cooperation. Imperfect cooperation for sure, but cooperation. Then what we all we're doing is causing ourselves more problems than need exist.
And I ended up just writing a lovely paper and giving a presentation on the preternatural gifts, which was topic of a live stream 3 or 4 months ago. So that was way more fun
It's just
and didn't
so
freak me out.
so here's well, something I've been contemplating, that the difference between the supernatural and the preternatural is really important, and we don't distinguish it enough in language and in just in
All right,
theology.
Xander, what do you mean by those words? Because they're really broad definition in 21st century American English.
I know, but the distinction I'm trying to draw is the preternatural are things that actually um well, it's magic, right? And in a sense, it's and but what I mean by magic, it's the magic that we see on stage, and it's all the magic that is actually exists. It's basically having um cause connect one thing, like cause thing one leading to thing two, but the actual causal chain being a mystery, right? So that's what's stage magics, right? Like you see something, and then the magician there's magic, and then B occurs. So it isn't that there isn't um the actual connection between A and B is a
It's
mystery,
hidden
but it
cause.
is a hidden cause, right? It's a hidden cause.
Okay.
I'm not sure
But
if
it's
preternatural is the best word for that, but go on.
okay. But so what it actually is it's something that's within the laws of nature, but we're not actually
Privy to it.
privy to it, right? So it's either because of deception or limited intentionally or unintentionally limited knowledge. Um, that's the a preternatural occurrence, and then a supernatural occurrence is actual divine intervention, and it only actually comes from God.
So I'm wondering, I
God's
mean, so
own,
you
yeah, yeah.
you're pretty decently on target there compared to the way Thomas Aquinas uses it. And since we're both Catholic, obviously we
Hmm.
should be holding ourselves to the standard of the great doctor.
Yeah.
So he used it specifically to talk about human nature, right? And so when you've got preternatural gifts like Adam was given, was constituted with, infused knowledge, rectitude of the will, um, integrity, and impassibility. These are things that were beyond, let's say, human nature as such. So you could still be a human being without having those things, but not outside of the order of nature itself. So it's like,
Mm. Yeah.
well, yeah, knowledge is a created thing, so belongs to the order of nature, we could say, and all of those things. And you're kind of using it like phenomenologically, where it's like
Yeah.
if somebody were to, like, let's say I had a chance encounter with somebody at the grocery store that really like changes things for the better, and I don't see all of the steps that lead to us encountering each other in order to make good things happen. But if somebody could see the whole picture and get both sides of the story, they would actually see everything working logically step by step. You want to call that preternatural?
Yeah. But yeah. So it's basically there's hidden knowledge involved. There's a there's hidden
Hidden
causes involved,
causes.
right?
I mean, I would. I'm
So
not
if
sure. You might just want to use providential right there.
Yeah.
well, the reason I'm using it is because here's what you want to take it, and this is fun, is that I think that um like that all demonic activity is preternatural in nature, and it comes from, and if we're going to Aquinas, is that they have demons heart because they're fallen angels. They don't have perspectival knowledge. They have sort of this sort of knowledge of all things, and they actually can um, they can use that to basically perform magic tricks, but also they to really invoke their will in the world, they need to get it, entice or tempt man to engage in these activities that then create that are part of their larger preternatural schemes.
Sure. So, I mean, the fallen angels are capable of placing an image in the imagination,
Yeah,
maybe stirring up the passions. Not even at all times, though, because sometimes you're just under divine protection as such.
yeah.
Um, and since it is coming from outside of our nature, you could call it preternatural.
Right.
So,
Because they're
and that would be
basically
a common enough use, I think.
yeah. So they're basically making they use um their hidden knowledge or their of the relationships to create to create conspiracies of evil basically, and it looks like magic to us. Well, it is what magic is, but it's not the same thing that God does, is basically what I'm putting down. That God's the only one who's capable of God, and his angels are the only ones who are capable of actual, like, um
Creation,
slash
creation.
creation and yeah,
Yeah,
slash op commands, right? The demons don't
yeah.
have access to that, but they can't what they can do is they can sort of
They parody it.
parody it, and they parody it using preternatural means, where they actually go and sort of like use the
Sure.
gifts of humans and stuff to create events and phenomena that are
Right, and so you'll
look
you'll find
magical.
that those who have, in a very dark way, handed themselves over to diabolical service, will often have like the inverse evil power that the saints would have. So you've got my man Saint John Vianney.
Mhm.
He could read people's souls in the confessional, right?
Yeah.
The holy angels gave him, knowledge and insight. If somebody forgot a sin or was concealing a sin, he would know about it and he'd call them out on it, and people lined up for hours to get 5 minutes with St. John Vianney. So, like, they were
Mhm.
showing up for that. Um, and one of the signs of demonic possession is somebody has secret knowledge that they shouldn't have access to.
Yeah.
Um,
But
that,
that gets to the natures of that
yeah,
gets to the nature of angels, both like
yeah,
and which Thomas Aquinas puts out. But
hmm,
what but
hmm.
when you actually have manifestations, right? The things in the world, like that, I don't think that God, and I, maybe there's exorcists that would be more knowledgeable in this stuff than me, but I think that what's actually going on there is the demons using basically putting on a magic show, right? Using their
Sure,
knowledge
yeah.
to
Well,
put on a
that's how
preternatural performance that mimics or is a mockery of
and that's
God's
how
actual
people
divine
get
interventions.
caught up in extremely severe cases of possession, which are thankfully still pretty rare, is and you'll hear the exorcists talk about it. Like they'll have somebody come to him and say, yeah, Father, I've got these demons that are tormenting me. And the exorcist is like, well, okay, like if you give your life over to Jesus, he could drive them away. But it's like, well, like, can you just get them to stop bothering me? But I can still, have these psychic consultation sessions where I make money
Hmm.
doing this in cahoots with demons, and then the priest is like, well, no, that's not how this works, right? Because well, so anyway, they're using these magic tricks, as you're calling them, as bait to keep the people on because they want to rebel by being able to acquire wealth, power, status, pleasure, but it ultimately leads to destruction.
Hmm.
So that's that. Now, the interesting thing is that, and maybe we take this from a grain of salt, because it's hard to know sometimes, if these things. So what happens is that exorcists will question during an exorcism session, and the demons will tell people things, and okay, let's see if we can figure this out. There was one particular case, I don't have the details on it. It was a very long exorcism. It took like over a year to over many sessions to accomplish this, and exorcists heard a lot of things in there. Um, and they said that the demons don't actually cooperate with each other, and
Mm,
that when there's any organization between them, it's the more powerful
yeah,
ones coercing the less
dominating
powerful
ones,
ones.
just like Soros and the CCP. They
I
don't actually
suppose.
cooperate, but yeah,
I
cooperate with each
suppose,
other.
yeah, that
Yeah,
there isn't any actual real cooperation there.
yeah,
Um,
but
which
they,
is just another way where goodness and evil aren't on parity
yeah,
because, like,
Yeah, one's
it's,
cooperation, the other's opposition.
the evil has to
Correct.
dominate, right? Well, one is
yeah,
rightful hierarchy, right? The God, so you actually which comes from servant leadership.
mhm.
So is what you see is the more powerful one in the divine hierarchy, the more powerful they're to serve the less powerful. But whereas which is charity, right? So you see that it's where the divine hierarchy is built on charity. The infernal hierarchy, if you can call it a hierarchy at all, the infernal
Lowerarchy,
maelstrom, yeah, lower, say
the infernal
maelstrom
bureaucracy.
bureaucracy, the infernal bureaucracy is based on tyrannical control, on binding the strong bind the weak to their will, the weak to their will, right? So and that's the comparison. Is tyranny versus charity, or the so the two oppositional forces. Whereas charity is about raising those those who are weaker than you up to whatever level they can attain. Tyranny is about binding those who are weaker of you to your will, to become an extension of your will, to make your will more strong and manifesting.
Yeah. So anyway, you just go to church on Sunday and don't play with Ouija boards and don't talk to Hermes,
Yeah.
and you'll be
Yeah, don't
fine from all of the worst of that. We all
don't write.
face regular old temptations. We
Hmm.
don't get away from that, but the really freaky stuff can be pretty consistently avoided
Hmm.
by just being good.
Yeah, don't write letters to Hermes is an important one.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big sign of evil right there.
Yeah.
Oh goodness.
So the other thing is that I didn't realize until this evening that the Sunday that we're going to have, that, and I guess this is true every year, basically the Sunday, if you have that you have a Corpus Christi on, if you're not having it on the Thursday, if you're having the procession on the Sunday, it's always going to be the Sacred Heart Sunday. It's the Feast of the Sacred Heart, because that's
Um
2 weeks after Pentecost.
yeah, yeah. So the calendar. Week after Pentecost, you get Trinity Sunday.
2 weeks is Sacred Heart.
And then yeah, either the Thursday or the Sunday afterward is Corpus Christi, and
And
then the
Thursday is the
Friday after
yeah.
that is the Feast of the Sacred Heart. Feast of
Oh,
the Sacred Heart's always on a Friday.
oh, it's not okay.
It's always on a Friday.
I was looking. I thought it said Sunday.
It's
Maybe
always on
not.
a Friday.
Okay.
I know this, right? I know this because I'm a canon lawyer. And as a canon lawyer, I know that any Friday that falls on a solemnity, you do not have an obligation to perform any kind of penance that day. And since the Feast of the Sacred Heart is a solemnity that always falls on a Friday, I make sure to have bacon on that day, just intentionally, on account of my canon lawyer leaders. It's like, well, if you got it right, you use
You
it.
exercise it.
Yeah, you always exercise that right if you give it to him. So yeah,
You're
always
right.
falls on a Friday.
It is always right. It's June 7th. It's always a Friday. Okay. So I was misleading people today because I thought it was going to be the Sunday. It's June 7th. All right. Oh, so then I have
It's
like
okay. You're like
lots
a
of
baby
time.
Catholic. Nobody,
Should be listening
expecting
to
you
what I
to.
say.
Nobody's expecting you to have the encyclopedic knowledge of all of the Catholic minutia because that's my job.
Hmm. Indeed. I'm like 3 or 3 years old. So I'm not only a toddler Catholic, I'm telling people.
Father Catholic. I'm hoping my hair grows in soon.
Yeah.
Oh my. Yeah. Yeah. No, we're done with Easter season now. We're into ordinary time.
Mhm.
Or as the old books would call it, the time after Pentecost, which I actually think is much more helpful than ordinary time.
And there was like there used to be a Pentecost octave, wasn't there?
Yes. Actually, I got to celebrate a mass for the Pentecost octave this week because I didn't have
Nice.
public mass, so I was hidden away in the bishop's chapel doing it, and it was like, oh dang, this would have been so cool. Why did they get rid of these things?
It was actually I heard so last week I was talking to a priest on the way back from an ordination, and he was telling me a story. I think it's who set the new calendar. Which pope was it? It was
Paul the Sixth.
Paul the Sixth. Yes, I thought Paul the Sixth. So apparently Paul the Sixth. There's a myth or a legend of that Paul the Sixth after the new calendar was
It's pretty well sourced.
instituted. Okay, that
Yeah.
instituted the day after Pentecost. He was brought his green vestments, and he's like, or he reached for his red vestments, and it was and he was, oh no, it's green today, it's ordinary time, and he responded, well, who made that decision? And and he was sheepishly told, that was you. and he
Your
and he
Holiness,
apparently
you signed the Apostolic Constitution promulgating the new General Roman calendar. No, so
and he was
Father John Zulsdorf, he has a blog. He's the one who tells that story, and
Mhm.
he heard it directly from the papal MC, who would have um, been in the room with
With
Paul the
John,
Sixth, Paul
Paul
the
the
Sixth
Sixth.
when
Yeah.
that happened. So that's the provenance of that story. So it's only like 3 steps,
Hmm.
from old Monsignor so and so to Father Zulsdorf to um,
Yeah, and it's
you.
plausible. It's
Yeah.
plausible too.
But yeah, well, I mean, Paul the Sixth, he was a worrier. And it's like that is like a historically documented fact. He was a worrier. Just very hand-wringy, nervous, not a bold general on horseback.
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah, that whole time is yeah, very strange days, odd things
Okay.
happening
I
all
have
over the place.
so here's a question for you.
Sure,
I'm
sure.
curious about um what do you think about the canonization of Michael McGivney? Do you feel like that's one that's going to come up anytime soon, or do you feel like he's
I sure hope so. I mean, he was pretty solid. The priests in that era were extremely susceptible to tuberculosis.
yeah.
You read accounts of, that 19th century Catholicism on the East Coast in the cities, and it's like these priests are dropping dead at 45 all over the place. So it was just really interesting, and we've got every indication that he was just fervent, serious about his faith, and he had that insight that the church doesn't want people belonging to secret societies unless they're basically our secret society. Like, why are you making secret oaths? We're the ones who are in charge of oaths. And guess what? That's actually correct.
Yeah.
Because the Freemasonic oaths are horrible.
Hmm.
So yeah, you don't want to have anything to do with those. And he noticed that these workers were getting caught up into these secret societies, partially because of the fraternity. That was an important thing. Partially because of the pageantry, which they were really into in those days. But a lot of it was basically life insurance. Like these
Hmm.
secret societies were the first life insurance companies. And that was a big deal because it's like they hadn't invented safety yet.
Yeah.
Safety was still decades down the line. And so, workers were just dying all over the place, and they would leave widows, bereft, and destitute.
Yep.
Which wasn't good. And so
And the
he,
kids would end up in Protestant orphanages.
yeah. So it was a mess. So he just came up with, hey, these secret societies that they're doing? Well, we're going to have a Catholic version of it, and your life insurance is going to be even better through us, right? And so
Mhm.
they still sell life insurance to this day, but
Yeah.
they don't do the secret society thing as much because that's gone out of fashion.
And then taking care of the widows and orphans was sort of like always a incentive of that too.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I've
and
been
was it charity, fraternity, patriotism.
I think you're wrong on the third one. It's charity. Yeah, you're right. It's charity, fraternity. What is the third?
Oh, we're both really bad knights.
I have
Worst nights ever.
worst night ever. This might have it.
I haven't been to a meeting in probably over a year now, so
Charity,
but, like,
fraternity.
they just kinda throw the clergy in there and say, "You're a knight now, and just
Yeah.
come to the meetings and be the chaplain." Yeah, so, but anyway, he was just really solid, straightforward, and, I hope we get to see him canonized because we
Yeah,
just need more Americans.
I sort of think that I get the impression of like because the calling it the Knights of Columbus was an intentional like call out to the Protestants like we were here first.
Well, it was like,
Catholics
"Hey."
found it. Yeah.
I mean, look, late 19th century United States of America, that was like everybody was super into Christopher Columbus, you know.
Hmm.
They were all huge fans, they were building the statues that we're tearing down now.
Hmm.
And hey, he was an Italian Catholic, you know. So
Mhm.
like we got a bunch of Italian Catholics coming to this country. We can all be proud of Christopher Columbus, even though
Yeah.
McGivney was Irish.
Yes. Yeah.
They could still be proud of Christopher Columbus. So it
I.
was it was definitely like a, hey, we're here and we're American,
Hmm.
as part of that impulse too.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that politically there may be issues these days. Like it doesn't sound like it. Like
Like
with
church politics or American
well
politics.
church. Yeah. Well, isn't sort of both like in the sense of just um
I don't know why it would be held up by anybody.
you don't think so? Well, I mean, I guess it wouldn't be expedited, would be another way to put it out.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't like it when they expedite it anyway. I think you
Mhm.
just wait around and if God wants this person canonized, he's going to give you a good miracle.
Mhm.
And like
Wasn't
this
there
whole
something I mean, they were talking I mean, I haven't read too much about this, but I heard that there was an announcement about Marian apposition I
apparitions.
apparitions.
Yeah, they
And it
put out new norms for investigating those, and I saw the headlines, and I thought, well, if Our Lady shows up in our diocese, I'll worry about this document then.
okay.
But
But I
until
heard
then, I'm just gonna.
so I heard that there was something in there about about miracles. Like it had sort of broader implications of recognizing miracles as well. So it was
Sure, I mean, like you could use the same things to investigate those things.
mhm,
And usually with these things, Marian apparitions and miracles, the church's judgment is something more like, this seems plausible and you can believe in it, and there's nothing that contradicts the Catholic faith there.
mm,
Private revelation, miracles, all these sorts of things. Yeah. So,
okay.
oh, hey, somebody remembered before the end of the stream. Any plans for the Moby Dick book club?
Oh yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah, okay. I was testing you, Somebody needed to remind me of this, right? Because I'm not going to.
Do you
Um,
want to? I'm gonna head out now, Father.
you gotta
But
head
yeah,
out. Gotta
yeah.
head out.
See you then. Good to
See ya.
see you.
Yeah,
See you
bye.
later. Alrighty. Moby Dick book club. I haven't made any plans. So everybody chime in there. Maybe we should just make a Discord server first. How about that?
You can use mine.
I suppose. Are you trying to grow your Discord server?
No, I just don't care much who's on it because if they misbehave, I'll kick them off. But like, I don't think any of your peeps are gonna
My Moby Dick people.
troll.
Well, how if somebody wanted to get to your Discord server, how would they go about doing that, Mark? Because it existed for months before you told me about it.
The Mark of Wisdom Discord server is public, so you should just be able to find it. Or you can reach out to me or Father Eric here, or any number of other people, and get an invite. But you should be able to find it and join. I don't think it's closed off or anything. It's definitely public. If you ping me
Let me
on
see.
Discord, I'll invite you. I don't care.
See, I'm just going to do a quick DuckDuckGo search to see if I can find it. Mark.
It should. I mean, it
Wisdom.
certainly shows up in the. If you're on Discord, you can Discord that way. I think there's a link to it on the markofwisdom.org website too, if I remember correctly.
There is. I was able to find a link to the Discord server in 10 seconds.
There might be one on petersonsphere.com as well.
Maybe. Yeah, and then we'll start. It's like we got to figure out how much of it we're going to read at a time because it's a big chunky book, you know.
Well, there's different ways to run book clubs. So one of the easier ways, in my opinion, is to have everybody read separately and just discuss. So say like, we'll read these 2 chapters. We're going to discuss them on this day and do that.
Mm-hmm.
With big texts, I think that's the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
There's other ways to do it too, right? That seems to be the best way, and then you just have an honor system of don't read ahead, because that actually causes problems in these sorts of books specifically.
What if you've read them already? You just
That's
kind of
usually
have
not
to.
a problem if you don't read ahead. Like if you try to stick to the chapters, like that's why you say you read these 2 chapters for this date, and then right. Yeah, that works really, really well. There's other formats. There's tons of other formats you can use, but that format seems to work well for large texts, because then it's easier to hone in on the important points,
Mhm.
because everyone's going to see different important points, right? There's going to be a lot of overlap, maybe, but also people are going to see different points, and then you get to discuss those points in that section, and it just makes things go a lot easier, right? So like when we read The Republic and people had read ahead or whatever, it got awfully confusing because they were tying in things that I was like, well, I can't comment on that. I haven't read ahead. Maybe that connection's there. I don't know. Right? Like maybe
Mhm.
you misread it, like, which is more likely. Right. So it's easier if you get everybody going at the same pace. It's easier for them to focus on that section. And whatever it is, 2 chapters, 3 chapters, I don't know how big Moby Dick is. So
Well, it's got big chapters. It's got really big chapters. I guess there's a few short ones in there, but a lot of them are like, hey, 20-page chapter, dense prose. We're going to talk about whales for 3 chapters.
that sounds totally skippable. But
Because
yeah,
that's what I'm wondering is if we shouldn't just do like the abridged read through, just hitting the highlights.
well, no, see, in that case, though, I'd say, like, look, there's 2 chapters on whales. We're going to read those 3 plus the next chapter and discuss, right? Because then you go, oh, okay, because you can do it by topic that way. And you don't have to worry about because a well structured text like Plato's Republic, it's ridiculously, it's ridiculously spot on, well structured. That doesn't make any sense. You got to read it one book at a time. But you can't do that with most other things. Like most other books aren't that well structured. So you end up having to pick, well, how far do we read in, right? And that makes sense. Most books don't build correctly, although language creation does. We are trying to plan a language creation book club too on my Discord server. So yeah, like that's a build book. So that's very well structured actually. So that's easy to do. But most books don't. Yeah, Moby Dick certainly doesn't sound like it lends itself. Like if I did one on like Ayn Rand or something, like did uh, Atlas Shrugged or something, yeah, there'd be a random number of not random, but there'd be a different number of chapters every time because there's a lot of redundancy.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like, well, you want to have something to discuss. You don't want to end up. Ayn Rand is just, I mean, I love her stuff, and I wouldn't change a page, but also kind of a mess. She's kind of making the same point over and over again from different perspectives, which I think is excellent. Not necessarily for me; it just bores the crap out of me. But you don't want to get caught up in that in a book club, right? And most books do that. Some do it well, and most don't do it well. But most books kind of get stuck, you know, in these patterns of trying to tell the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. So you don't want to get caught in that pattern. Like if he's really talking about nothing but whales for 3 chapters, that's a 4 chapter week right there. And because you're going to have, 3 chapters of skip, but you don't want to skip it, right? You want to skip talking about it, right? You want to touch on it real quick and, oh yeah, interesting whales, cool. Whales good. Whales large, swim
Yeah,
fast.
I don't know. I'm getting the sense you haven't read this book. There's just
Nope.
meaning coming out of everything, out of every pore, as far as I'm
Maybe,
concerned.
maybe, but that doesn't mean that you can discuss it in a book club. Like there's large sections of Plato's Republic that they're kind of a skip in a book club. You have to read them, right? But you can't talk about them in the book club because like they're the beginning of the idea or the middle of the idea. And that
Mhm.
you can't really talk about the beginning and middle of the idea. That doesn't work, right? So I mean that's the mistake everybody makes with Plato's Cave. They take the allegory, which is in the very beginning of the book, they skip the first couple sentences, which are extremely important. So they lop those off the front, right? And then they go, aha, there's the allegory of the cave. And then they completely change the context and everything else, and they discuss it. And it's like, but that's actually the opposite of what Plato was saying for real. Like, I don't even like
Uh,
that's a problem.
you can go watch his video on navigating patterns if
You
you
can
want to
watch
hear
the
more
Lie of
about that.
Plato's Cave
The
if you
Lie
want
of
to
Plato's
know.
Cave.
Yeah.
What I want to know is what do you find most valuable about Ayn Rand?
There's a lot of valuable things about Ayn Rand, right? Because in some ways, the way she and there's a problem with this, an obvious problem, but it's not the problem that will seem most obvious. She has a definition of selfishness and the virtue of selfishness that if you actually understand what she's saying is fantastic. It's so helpful. Right. And this is one of those tricky things that I think Christians in particular, if there can be such a category, get completely wrong um, on one side or the other, right? They either deny selfishness can have any value, which is ridiculous and foolish. If you define it correctly, it has immense value. Uh, or they over identify with that, right? And then it's Protestantism, right? Like you, the book, God, problem solved, right? Then you're an individual, right? So the individualism comes from, among other places. Um, Selfishness, truly understood, uh, the way Ayn Rand puts it, and it is a hard point to get, uh, is amazing. Like the virtue of selfishness, or probably a better way to say it is virtuous selfishness, because that is a thing, right? She doesn't make the point clear or as well for the concept of sacrifice, but it's there anyway because you can't avoid it in some sense, right? Like it's
Is this idea of virtuous selfishness and also sacrifice, are those two ideas like you have to navigate between them where sometimes one, sometimes the other, and
no,
prudence to
no,
discern them?
no. I mean, no. This is the thing. Like the way she talks about the virtue of selfishness is because you are in the world with other people, everything you're doing is connected to them, and therefore it's selfish of you to make the world a better place. It's roughly what it is. And when you understand that, and I did not read her shorter stuff, I read the 2 damn novels that are ridiculous numbers of pages. And that was extraordinarily painful for me. And I can't to this day believe that I did it, even though I know that I did, because like I get to 120 pages and I'm like really struggling. So, these are 1,000+ page tomes, basically. Um, the 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 idea, for example, that when you create, say, a skyscraper or something, you're contributing to society in an enormous way, but you've done it to benefit yourself, because it benefits you because it benefits society, because those two things are inseparable. Right. That's the virtuous side of selfishness. There's a non-virtuous side. That's why I said, did they phrase it one way? I would phrase it the other way, right? Because there's a dangerous aspect, an egoic aspect to selfishness. So you could think of it psychologically. You could say there's an egoic aspect to selfishness and a non-egoic aspect to selfishness. And the non-egoic aspect of selfishness is something that she does highlight. You could easily argue she does a poor job of it. I can't I can't defend her job of it. I can say it's there though, and
Mhm,
lots of people get a lot out of it.
mhm.
Most people misunderstand it. Like I'd say, yeah, most Catholics also misunderstand, right? And
Well, I've
all
never read
Protestants.
it, so I haven't had the opportunity to misunderstand it. I had heard that there was some strange relationships that she was involved in, and that she ultimately had a materialist philosophy. So I was just kind of like,
Her her philosophy, yeah, she couches her philosophy in materialism, but like selfishness isn't material and virtue isn't material.
sure. And people are inconsistent all the time.
Well, but it's not an inconsistency. The philosophy she espouses is fundamentally non-material. That's
Mhm,
that's why people believe she has a philosophy. I would argue she doesn't
mhm,
actually. Right? I would say she's not a philosopher. She doesn't have a philosophy, but what she does have is an exemplification of something important. Um, and I think, yeah, it's not. No, there's no such thing as enlightened self-interest, right? Because you can't define enlightened self or interest. It's another one of those things.
I
Three
mean,
words that can't
I
be
think of
defined.
it in terms of what Catholic social teaching would mean by the common good, which isn't what your, maybe your friendly neighborhood organizer, community organizer would mean by the common good. It's like the fact that I contribute to a society and keep the, let's say, machinery running. I keep my lawn clean. We keep law and order. It's like that's a common good that we can all share in,
Yeah,
right? That's what it'd
right,
be. We hold it together. That's where the
right,
common part of it
right,
comes from.
right. But again, the thing that Ayn Rand sort of highlights is that, especially for, so novels are talking about one percenters, not 10 percenters, one percenters.
Hmm.
Right? She's talking about the people that can do everything in a project by themselves for real.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
extraordinarily, it's ridiculously rare. It's not
Hmm.
you, guaranteed for all values of people watching forever. It's almost certainly not you. Um, that's who she's talking about. Those people can't help but move the world. Then the question is, how do they move the world? Well, they move the world in some ways through selfishness, right? But they move the world virtuously. And the reason why they move the world virtuously in her world is because they move the world through doing the thing, right? In other words, again, you can't build a skyscraper and not have a huge impact on a bunch of people you'll never meet. It's not possible. The skyscraper is there and it's in the world and it's undeniable, right? And so um understanding that helps you to understand the parasitic nature of communism, which is her real point, is that communism has a parasitic nature and can only ever have a parasitic nature. And therefore, it is inherently destructive. And therefore, they will always go after the virtuous people, for example, which is what happens in the novels. And so it's very well
Which
exemplified.
is what happened in communist Russia. So
And communist China and
China
communist
and
every other communist
every other time
thing
they tried it.
ever.
So
And
that.
not just communist. All socialism is that. All of it. It's
Mhm,
all the same ethos.
mhm,
That's also the ethos that, and thank you for joining me for this, that we'll be talking about with respect to the patriarchy on navigating patterns. That will come out soon, probably Friday, actually, if it's edited in time. That ethos is everywhere. That parasitic, we're going to take things away, or we're going to rebel, or we're going to, shout out against or identify against, is everywhere. And the person that does the best job that I've ever seen or even heard about exemplifying that is Ayn Rand, by far, by far.
Well, there you have it, folks. I'm going to bed because I'm tired. Good night, and God bless you all. I will join you all next week from Washington, D.C.